Should we assume now through the eyes of this administration, and we've heard the president talk about wind quite a lot, that it is not a viable resource for the grid? Is the domestic wind industry dead?
I think in the One Big Beautiful Bill, President Trump advocated we remove the subsidies for wind. Look, offshore wind is twice as expensive as onshore wind, and we wouldn't have a big onshore wind industry without a lot of subsidies. So, yeah, I would say the economic outlook for offshore wind in the United States is not promising. But that's not just in the United States. Look, 3 countries went all in offshore wind, Germany, Denmark, and the United Kingdom, and they now all compete for the most expensive electricity in the world. That's not the path President Trump wants America headed down.
Secretary Wright, those are the 3 countries that also invest in the wind sector in the United States, notably Denmark, Ørsted, Vestas, even some of the others in Scandinavia. For an administration that's been pushing foreign direct investment onto the states, doesn't this disincentivize that from the very countries you're speaking about?
We absolutely want foreign direct investment in the United States from all over the place, but these should be projects that are viable without subsidies, and that add to our economy and add to the profits of the investors. Offshore wind has been entirely a government-mandated, government-funded business. The U.S. did have 4 years going down the European pathway of expensive, government-driven, unreliable energy. And President Trump ran on reversing that. And, surprise, surprise, he got in power and is reversing it. His goal is affordable, reliable, secure energy that makes the lives of Americans better. It's pretty simple.
Secretary Wright, let's talk about another source of energy then, and that, of course, is oil. We've heard the president talk about secondary or tertiary sanctions when it comes to buyers of Russian oil. Talk to us about who that could potentially include outside of, say, India, for example. Are you thinking about Hungary, Slovakia, even Turkey, a NATO member? Who is that targeting?
Look, the goal for President Trump here, this is entirely based on war. He's just trying to bring peace to the Russia-Ukraine conflict, which has been a brutal 3.5-year conflict so far. He's looking for any way he can to bring the parties to the table and get a peace. Russia's main source of revenue, and certainly what's funding its war machine, is its exports of oil and natural gas. Most of Russian exported oil, about 90% of it, is bought by China and India. So here's a way where he's trying to dramatically reduce Russia's ability to export oil so they can't fund the war machine, and it'll bring peace.
Can you shed some light on the plan if this doesn't go the way the president wants to, Secretary? President Trump today referred in the Oval Office to a second or even third phase of secondary sanctions. Do you plan to unpack them in layers like that if Russia does not stop killing civilians in Ukraine?
Look, the president is a master negotiator, and I'm certainly not going to leak his plans that might be coming. His goal is to put as little pressure as possible and get to the right result. So right now he's waiting to see if the trajectory we're on right now brings the parties together for peace. And if it doesn't, as you heard him say, of course there's additional steps. But I certainly won't be leaking those today.
Secretary, have you done the math on what the cost is to American energy consumption? Every time sanctions are put on India, Russia, China, Europe, that, of course, has a cost on the global oil market and feeds right back into the cost on American consumers. What's the math on that?
The math on that is the way you keep oil prices down is you encourage supply, particularly supply in the United States. The United States is actually a net oil exporter today. And President Trump has taken a number of actions, both through his executive pen, through the Department of Energy, and through the One Big Beautiful Bill to grow American oil production, which is at all-time highs today. And gasoline on an inflation-adjusted price is about as low as it's been in 2 decades. So I think we're on a pretty good track there. He wants more energy produced in the United States, lower energy prices, and more energy-consuming industries to locate in the United States. I think he's on a great path.
Well, Secretary Wright, you're talking about more supply hitting the market, but the Baker Hughes rig count has been down this year by a significant margin. Most of that supply isn't coming from the states on the global market. It's coming from OPEC. How do you justify that to the American consumer and the South that is dependent on that energy production?
The rig count is down right now because oil prices have come down. That's a benefit for consumers. That does make it tougher for oil and gas companies. But oil production today is still at record highs. And we have the low oil, gasoline, diesel prices, input chemicals for petrochemicals. They're all in a very healthy place right now. And I think we'll continue to see that trajectory. He's lowering the costs of oil producers as well. We've got to do everything we can to lower their costs so at increasingly low oil prices, they can make a profit and continue to drill. That's what he did in his first term, and that's what he's doing in the second term. And again, quite excited about the trajectory we're on.
Well, we've talked quite a bit here on Bloomberg with you, Secretary, about the hunger for more energy, thanks to the incredible number of data centers that are sprouting up like weeds around the country. We're no strangers to them here, right near Northern Virginia, the data center capital of the world. And so there's a big question about how we can continue to provide more clean, renewable energy. I know that nuclear may be a long-term answer, but in the meantime, it seems to be LNG. When will you cut the ribbon on a new pipeline to deliver LNG to the data centers that need it?
Oh, there's a lot of that going on right now. And these are mostly smaller or local pipelines, but you're 100% right. That's a good reminder note to me. I need to go out to one of those ribbon cutting for these new connector pipelines. But yeah, come with me. Because look, as you said, the natural gas we consume in the U.S., of course, is not LNG. It stays in a gasified form. It's much cheaper. It's transported by pipeline. Huge energy costs for the United States. It's by far our biggest source of electricity today, and I think its market share will only grow as it expands. It'll be the dominant supply of new energy for artificial intelligence, for AI. We need somewhere about 100 gigawatts of more firm capacity in the next 4 or 5 years. That's a stretch, but I think Team America and with President Trump's leadership, we'll get it done.
Secretary Wright, you talk about reclaiming market share, especially on the LNG story. Over the weekend, we've seen China and India reinforcing their commitments and even increasing them when it comes to buying some of the gas supply, specifically from Russia. Does that eat into your market share when it comes to U.S. LNG exports to Asian consumers?
So it is the fastest growing energy source on the planet. Russia, almost all of Russia's gas went west into the European market, 4 pipelines. And then, of course, Russia proved what a reliable supplier they are. And all their European customers, they're not off all Russian gas yet, but they are rushing to do that. American LNG is filling that hole. Russia had 1 pipeline going east, the Power of Siberia, that went to China. And now they've made an agreement to build a second line that'll be the Power of Siberia 2 that will go to China. But, Russia's got 1 customer. The United States has got about 50 customers around the world, and I think we'll have 100 customers in the next few years. So, yeah, of course, Russia's going to sell gas to China. That's okay. But I feel pretty good about U.S. competition in supplying natural gas around the world. It's our fastest growing export.
Your Energy Department Secretary, I don't mean to interrupt, was out with a report just a couple of weeks ago, the end of July, around climate impacts from energy production. We spent some time with it here today in the newsroom. Is climate no longer a concern for the Energy Department?
I would say we've just put climate change in its rightful place. It is a real physical phenomenon. It's a slow-moving phenomenon. I've studied it for 20 years, as have many scientists around the country. But we need to put it in its rightful place. We hear so much it's a crisis, it's causing every storm or hurricane or flood, and those things are just false. So what we did with that climate report, 90% of what's in that climate report is straight out of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reports that are done every 6 or 7 years from scientists around the world. For people that are scientifically literate, it's actually not controversial what's in that report. It's just kind of we publish the quiet part so that the Americans can have a more realistic view of this phenomenon. It's just not even close to the world's greatest problem. But that's the only reason we've justified putting expensive wind turbines up. Why should we burden Americans with expensive electricity prices and scare our children and push businesses away in the name of like a crisis that's going to end the world in a few years? None of that is in the climate science. We're very excited to have an open, robust, data, fact-based climate debate. I'm thrilled about that paper and couldn't be more pleased with the 5 authors who wrote it.
Secretary Wright, I'm visiting here in Washington from London, and I'm sad to be here because I feel like I'm missing your trip to Europe, where I'm usually based. Walk us through your message to your European partners when you make it to Milan next month.
Yeah, so of course I'll talk about what's happened in natural gas in the United States and the world. I already mentioned it's 40% of the expansion of world energy production in the last 14 years. 40% comes from one source, natural gas. And look, I think we've got a lot of credit here for the American shale revolution. We've more than doubled American natural gas production, lowered the cost by more than half. And that allows us to win the AI race, to reshore manufacturing in our country, but also to supply our allies around the world so they can get energy from secure allies as opposed to adversaries and foes that are uncertain. Think of all the money that went into building those 4 gigantic Russian pipelines into Europe, and then the Russian troops go along one of those pipelines that goes right through Ukraine and invade that country and that neighbor. I think that made everyone realize energy is absolutely critical. It's critical to economic security. It's critical to national security. I'd say those 2 points, that's why President Trump got elected. That's the center of his agenda.